Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Tommey, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey there, I'm so glad that you're with me on the podcast today. Listen, today's episode is going to be really one that is exciting and one that's going to lift your vision. You're going to be hearing from my friend artist Lesa Vander Bie, who lives out on the West Coast, has been a member of Created to Thrive Artist Mentoring Program for quite a while now, and is just seeing some incredible breakthrough happen in her life as she really starts to step into everything that God's called her to be in the kingdom. And here's the cool thing. She started responding to God's call on her life to paint even before she knew how to paint. Yes, you heard that right. You know, it reminds me of that quote from Henry Blackaby that said, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And you're gonna love hearing about how her participation in the mentoring program, coming to one of our mastermind events, and then God just beginning to set up divine appointment after divine appointment after divine appointment in her life when she said yes to the calling that God had on her life as an artist. So I can't wait for you to hear that. Also, just want to remind you, today's Friday, and it's the next to the last day. Tomorrow's the last day, September 21st, to become a part of the Created to Thrive Artist Mentoring Program for this year. We're shutting the doors. We do this every fall, and we're shutting the doors for the rest of the year, even into the spring next year. So it's the last opportunity for you to become a part of the mentoring community. Listen, we've taken so many podcasts to talk about the transformation this month that has happened in so many people's lives. Hopefully you've been seeing the Facebook interviews. You've been seeing the videos that are out there. You've been hearing these interviews with people whose lives have been completely changed because they started to say yes to the Lord. They chose to be a part of the mentoring program and walk through this process that I've developed over the years in the context of community that helps you to align with your kingdom calling, reset your mind to come into alignment with who God's called you to be, what His reality is for your life, what His plan is for your life, and then learn the practical things that you need as an artist and as a business person to gain the confidence that you need to really thrive as an artist in the marketplace or as a person that's called to do your art as ministry. Now, all you have to do is just click the link that's inside the show notes today. You can become a member today and tomorrow up until midnight, and then that's going to be the last chance for this year. Listen, I don't want you to be emailing me on Monday or on Sunday morning going, Matt, I really wanted to, but I didn't. And please, we're not going to open the doors. All right. The last opportunity, all right, is Saturday at midnight. So make sure you do that before we close the doors. And I can't wait to get to know you, to introduce you to our incredible community of artists all over the world, and really start hearing your story. In fact, I was just talking to, on a previous podcast, my friend Linda Sondels. Maybe you heard her interview from just a couple of podcasts ago. She told me at the end, after we got off the interview, she said, Matt, if you'd have told me that a year ago I would be sitting here on a podcast telling you my story of the transformation that God has done in my life through this mentoring program, I would have said you were crazy. She said, but guess what? She was. And that could be you. Listen, next year, even before that, I could be sitting here interviewing you on the podcast, talking about the incredible transformation that God's done in your life. Nothing would give me greater joy. But the only thing that it takes is your yes. All right. So do that. All right. And I look forward to seeing you inside Created to Thrive. All right. Now, hey, listen, before we get to Lesa's interview today, I want to take a moment, as I always do, to give a shout out to one of our podcast listeners. And this is actually from Amy Smith. She says that the podcast is truly thriving. Here's what she said in her review. She said, I can't even begin to describe how valuable Matt's teaching has been in helping me grow as an artist in the kingdom. This podcast is so full of good encouragement, information, and direction. I'm so glad to be able to have it playing on the commute to my studio. Thanks for everything, Matt. Well, Amy, thank you for writing that review, for listening to the podcast, and for sharing your story as an inspiration to others. And thank you guys, really, for listening to the podcast. It really is a huge encouragement to me and my team to know that you're out there listening, that you're subscribing, that you're reviewing, that you're sharing it with friends, so that we can all be a part of this army that God's raising up all over the world. Well, hey, listen, I'm going to get out of the way. I've got a great interview for you. Here's my friend, Lesa Vander Bie. Well, hey there, everybody. It's Matt, and I'm so excited to have my friend Lesa Vander Bie on with me today. Lesa's an incredible artist from the West Coast. And Lesa, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I'm really glad to be here.
Absolutely. We've known each other now for a couple of years, and you have such a interesting background, I think. You're not only an artist, but professional in other realms as well. So why don't you give everybody a little idea of who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Absolutely. I live here in Southern California in a little village town called Corona del Mar, and just about 6 blocks from the ocean. And I have been a psychotherapist for the last 25 years in private practice, and intermittently, since I was 18, I have studied dance. I was on point in ballet. I have acted and sang professionally for, goodness, 25, 30 years now. So while I was practicing as a therapist, I was constantly drawn to the arts. It's like God just planted that seed in me very, very young, and it had to be fed. So it was always a part of the picture, but always on slightly the back burner. And I really poured myself into my work as a therapist for many years. And then in 2013, my father passed away from lung cancer, and I was extremely close to my dad. And it really hit me in the chest. And I really found myself really longing to go back to my creative core that God put there so innately. And I had no idea what that meant or what that was going to look like, but I just really, really needed it back in my life, and more full-time than part-time. Yeah. So I wasn't sure, what that meant at 55 years old. But I heard through a friend who lived in Bend, Oregon about Tommey mentoring. And and so I joined in January of 2018. And I went to your first mastermind that was available that March, and had a great experience there. It was really just, words can't express the connection I made with our small group. And we called each other the Slingshot Sisters of the Hot Seat. And because we had such epiphanies in that group, and such amazing words of wisdom for each other that we walked away with, and then we kept in touch ever since. But when I was there, I noticed everybody was having these amazing downloads from God, on where they were going next with their business or their art or their vision, or, how to develop that. And I really wasn't getting that at the conference. And I thought, this is really interesting. And I thought, well, God can talk to me when I get home. It doesn't have to happen here in Asheville. And a couple weeks before I went to Asheville, I met a local artist. He was a renowned oil painter, and he was doing a live demonstration. And we had this amazing connection. And so when I got home, I had actually done some watercolor painting to process my grief after my dad died, at the insistence of a friend. And I was just dabbling in watercolor, never having taken art classes as a kid or as an adult. I had no idea what I was doing. And
just jumped in, right?
Right, just go for it, right? I even bought the wrong brushes. I bought craft brushes instead of watercolor brushes. That just tells you how much I knew about art. And so anyway, lo and behold, I would post these little watercolor images on Facebook, and people were wanting to buy them. And I wasn't even trying to sell them. So I thought, well, kind of interesting. Wow. I thought you'd have to, become an artist through 10, 15, 20 grueling years of, really honing the craft and studying it and learning it. And so I thought, okay, I'll take a few local watercolor classes. But I felt really restricted at some point. And so I got back from Asheville, and this man that I had met, his name was just seared on my mind, almost like God just planted it on my frontal lobe. And so I had placed a call to him to see if he would mentor me. And when I was at the conference, you gave us just this amazing book list of, Created to Thrive, and, just all the wonderful books that you have authored that I bought. And I also bought the book Dreaming with God by Bill Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
So, I was reading that book, and I hit page 80 and 81. I don't know if you remember his story about the Roadrunner and the Eagle.
Yes.
Do you?
I'd love that story.
Well, it applies to me, because as I was reading that story where he was talking about this mass exodus that took place from his church, and how they had been praying for enough money to be able to build this prayer house, and they felt like it was just an impossibility with half of the church gone. So they kept praying, and this roadrunner with a lizard in his mouth kept showing up to their prayer meeting. And so they started researching, what does this mean, and they found that in the Bible, the eagle represents the prophetic, or what's to come. And they said that the roadrunner may have been assigned to the church with this lizard in his mouth every week, that God was going to provide, even though it seemed like the impossible. So that same night, as I'm reading this book, my mom calls from Arizona, and she's a major prayer warrior. And so she says that she was just praying that God's favor would just rain down on me in the year and, or two ahead, with my art, not knowing where it was going to go, but just that he would bless the socks off me. Here she is, 85 years old, sitting in her easy chair praying for me. And she gets up to shut the house down. And she goes out into the garage, and there's a roadrunner sitting on my dad's truck in the garage.
Get out of town.
She does. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
I love it.
She doesn't. I know, and she doesn't want to shoo him away, so she leaves the garage door open, and she locks the door and goes to bed. And so I told her about what I was reading here in Dreaming with God. So she was totally excited about what symbolism that had for me. So I get off the phone. 10 minutes later, my phone rings again, and it's John, this oil painter, calling me to say that he absolutely will mentor me. And I start talking with him, and I find out that his last name is Eagle, John Eagle.
Now let me just pause, because I think so many people are listening to this and they're like, what? And then what happened? I mean, I think it's so amazing, and I hear this all the time, and you're so beautifully have shared your story so far. It's like there's an acceleration that begins to happen in people's lives when they say yes to God's calling on their life, when they begin to align with God's kingdom purpose in their life. I know for me, I called it like double doors of favor. Like all of a sudden, like my whole life, I've been waiting on these doors to open. And as soon as I began to say yes to the kingdom, all of a sudden, whoosh, all this stuff opened up. And that's what I'm hearing from you, Lesa. It's like this tidal wave of abundance. I mean, you obviously see that. And did you know that was what was happening at the time when it started happening?
I did. In fact, it was so crazy. That night I called my mom back, and I said, "You're never going to believe what happened right after we hung up. John Eagle calls," and she goes, "Eagle?" I said, "Yes, that's the man who's going to mentor me." I said, so the same night I'm reading about this story about the Roadrunner and the Eagle, the Roadrunner and the Eagle show up in my life on the same night. And she was just like, well, this is no coincidence. This is God showing you his favor and saying, I'm in this with you.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, but I can't even paint yet, so what's, where are we going from here?
Small detail, Lesa, small detail. That's
just a small detail, Matt.
Oh.
So, and then of course, what's really interesting about when God gives you a prompt, and when you really listen to God, you don't go through the process of deducting it the way human beings want to do. We want to break everything down and say how it's not going to work.
Right.
I can assure you that when I met John at this live demonstration, we had such an amazing connection, and it was a God connection. It was a God appointment, and we both know that, John and I. And it was so crazy because I could have walked away going, yeah, I don't really have any interest in learning oil. I was looking for a watercolor mentor, but he doesn't teach watercolor, so therefore, why would I do this? I never had that conversation with myself. I just followed the cues that God was giving me, and it was so strong. The urge was so strong to ask him to mentor me that I knew it was from God, and I had no idea where we were going. And so
I think that's just so important for people to realize too, that, so many times we're concerned about the how. How is this going to work out? What are the details? All that. And it's like, we just need to be concerned about the what. The what is, you needed a mentor. You needed to connect with what God was going to be doing in your life. And the results are up to him. And I think the more that,
absolutely,
just like you're saying, the more that we can release those results to him and say, okay, Lord, whether you lead me this way or that way, I ultimately trust that you've got this thing under control, and I'm going to trust you in the middle of it. And the results are always so much better than we could have ever planned. I mean, that's so awesome.
Isn't that amazing? That's so true. And I think when I think about being in Created to Thrive and the things that I've been learning, I had to lean extensively into God's plan and into trusting him more through this process than anything before, because I had opposition. I had colleagues in the counseling profession telling me that I must be going through midlife, or it must be extended grief from my dad dying, or I must need to go back to therapy and have my head kind of screwed back on straight. And I just thought, no, none of the above. I don't need therapy. I know where I'm going. I'm trusting God, and it's okay if you don't understand his marching orders for me, but I do, and that's all that matters. So fast forward a year later, John Eagle, I thought, I don't even know if I can afford this guy. And he told me it was $50 a session. And I said, well, how long is the painting session each week? He said 3 hours. I said, $50 for 3 hours? He said, yeah. And I thought, that's remarkable. How long have you been painting? He said, he started when he was 55 and he's 80. And so he has given me such confidence. It's like between God and you and Created to Thrive and John Eagle, I have just grown in confidence, not to the point of not realizing I need to continue to grow and learn. By no means. I feel like there's so much more I need to learn, but God has put me in a launch position, not unlike our name, the Slingshot Sisters. I feel like I've been pulled back in the chair, and God is about to release me, because I've got 2 huge festivals and shows coming up in November and December. And although things have been lean financially, I just know that God is going to bless me. It's just, he's showing me through commissions I'm getting every month, through people following me out of the Sawdust Festival when I paint at my mentor's booth live, to buy my art that I painted that day. I mean, it's just constant. My neighbor ran into me with her sister and wanted me to paint a huge 5-foot hydrangea piece for her. So I did that a couple months ago. And it keeps coming. I have a dear Christian friend that lives in Texas who's a wonderful watercolorist. And she reached out to me through Facebook the other day and wants me to paint the Monterey, California coastline for her parents and do a 4.5-foot piece and ship it to Texas. So I'm suddenly getting a lot of traction. And I'm thinking in November, December, when I do my festival and my show, that God is going to open the doors even further. I really believe that. I have no reason not to.
Absolutely. One of the things that you, I think, are really great at is planting seeds with people. You've been so intentional about doing that, investing in your community, talking so much about the things that I share about in the mentoring program of strategic partnerships, building relationship, connection.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times I think because we are kingdom people and believe in the supernatural and everything, there can be some people that sit on the sidelines and think, well, if I'm going to do this in my life, he's going to do it, and I'm just going to wait and reap the results. But I think more often than not, what I hear in your story, and I've seen in my own life and so many artists, it's this co-laboring that we dream with him.
Yes.
We get out there and do the work, and then we're trusting him with a spirit of expectancy that he's leading and guiding, and the seeds that we're planting, although we don't know exactly when they're going to come up or how they're going to come up or in what quantity or in what season, we know that they're going to come up. And talk a little bit about that, because that really is a walk of faith for all of us, no matter where you are on the journey.
As far as planting seeds and strategic partnering?
Yeah, just the connections, because I think, that's such a huge part of building
it's critical.
Building a reputation as an artist.
Absolutely. I think, I think even if I hadn't been a therapist, I've always been a people person. So I've always had a love for getting to know people and hearing their story, and it can be a virtual stranger. I just find, human nature so fascinating. And, but I think we have to first show that we're interested in people before we try to sell something to them. And I think that's been a motto that you've taught us as well. But you have to go out there, and you have to have enough belief in your value as a human being. And that all comes from renewing your mind. That's where you have to really believe who God created you to be, and that you are worthy as a human being, and you are worthy as an artist, and to not be shy about putting yourself out there. Even if you're a new artist, even if you're at the beginning of your journey, you really have to do that work. And God calls us to do that work. If you look at anybody in the Bible,
that's right,
they had to go out and preach the good news. They had to go to different cities. They had to meet with new people. They couldn't stay isolated where they were comfortable in their little community where they had already spread the word. They had to keep moving. And I think that's the same thing. God wants us not just to plant seeds to build our business, but to share the good news of his salvation through our art, through our ministry, through our testimony. And when I tell people my story, and just, a little bit about how I went through some compassion fatigue, I've worked with a lot of trauma-based work and high-risk cases over the years. And it's amazing when they hear my story, they're just so intrigued. In fact, I went to a deli the other day near my house to grab something to eat. And as I was walking past one of the little homes nearby, this girl who I was in a Bible study with 4 years ago remembered me, and she was standing outside with her baby, and she said to her friend, "You should hear Lisa's story. Boy, does she have a story."
Wow.
And I thought, wow, she's been tracking me on Instagram since, our little Bible study disbanded. Yeah. And I thought, that's amazing how it's spreading like wildfire, and I don't even know how far reaching it's even gone so far. And it's really about, I think we are lights in this world, but we have to, like I heard Michael Youssef and David Jeremiah talk this weekend on Sunday about, we have to be willing to go out and share the good news, because if we're just good people, then the person that needs Christ sees that we're a good person, but they don't know why we're a good person. And so I think, we have to go out there into the marketplace and touch people and just show love. You don't have to quote scripture. You don't have to, be heavy-handed, but show love, show interest, show curiosity in people. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you might have something that will brighten their day, that will bring them peace or joy or serenity or a sense of hope. And that's what I feel my art conveys. And who knows what else people will feel when the Holy Spirit moves through my piece as they look at it.
That's right.
So,
Lisa,
I remember that basket that you made, that beautiful weaving that was on your wall in your studio, and that man walked in and said, "I feel like God, his arms are reaching out to me, saying that he's got everything in control."
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
It absolutely is. I think we can make the connection between what you create and the place that God's placed you in the marketplace as an artist, and how he wants to release transformation through you. It really is empowering. And I think at first it's kind of surprising, and then it's like, oh, okay, this is how this is this is great. So I wanted to just transition a little bit, because you mentioned community being such a big part of this transformation process that God's brought you through, and mentioned, this whole idea of, coming out of another professional realm, being a counselor, having a lot of colleagues that are or counselors, kind of a different perspective maybe than what you're walking in now with your art. Talk about the importance of community and having a group of artists around you that know the Lord, that get you, that are praying for you, supporting you, and can become that sounding board that you need. We all need for the journey that
absolutely. Yeah, I think, in fact, one of the first notes I jotted as I was preparing for today was, what really impacted you the most being in Created to Thrive, and I think it was community. I stepped into the group and I immediately felt enveloped by a sense of receptivity, and I think we all need a feeling of belonging, especially as we're growing and stretching and learning and taking risk and following God's voice. And each of our paths are so uniquely different as far as how they unfold, how they accelerate, and you can't do this alone, because I think, Satan wants to use our thought process to keep us in a pit and in a ditch so that we stay confused and we stay discouraged. Those are two of his most powerful weapons, is to keep us discouraged so that we don't advance forward with God's, calling on our life. And when we stay in community, we stay reinforced and we stay protected and we stay shielded through reminding each other through scripture, through prayer, through wisdom, exactly why we're doing what we're doing, and to stay straight on that path and to not waver. And I think we can get distracted so easily, even unintendedly, when we're outside of a community that embraces us and supports us with this journey. It's critical. It's it's essential. It's not optional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lesa, you are an articulate ambassador for the kingdom, and I'm so tickled to see, that's a good Southern word. I'm just tickled to death, but I'm just so.
I love that.
I really am. I'm just so excited to see what God's done in your life and to have been a small part of that. And I love just continuing to see what God is doing in your life. I know others are going to want to follow what's going on online with your life and art. So where's the best place that folks can connect with you online?
I have a Facebook page, Lesa Vander Bie Art, and so people are more than welcome to jump on my page. That would be great. Instagram is a very active site for me, same call name, Lesa Vander Bie Art. And I'm also rebuilding my website on Squarespace. I'm on WordPress right now, and I've had some issues there, so I'm switching platforms, and I'm going to be building a brand new, beautiful, crisp, clean website. So I'm really excited about that. So if you go to my website and you see an error page, my apologies. I don't know how to clear it. Just go straight to my art or connect page, and you'll see what you need there. But thank you, Matt, from the bottom of my heart for everything you do for our group, because you're like a warrior. I mean, I can't imagine how you keep up on your end and still weave baskets. It's quite remarkable.
I'm still managing somehow, so I don't know. Grace, I guess. So.
I think you've been cloned and we just don't know it.
Maybe so. I wish somebody would tell me so I could take it further. Oh, no. The thing that keeps me going is the stories. And I think I tell my team that all the time. I said, don't ever get tired of hearing, I'm getting choked up. Don't ever get tired of hearing the stories of transformation, because these are not just Facebook posts that are out there. These are people's lives that are forever being.
That's right.
And I think for each of us, as we live the life that God's created us to live, it becomes fire for others, to light their fire and to say, this is possible for you. And I love that.
And I think you're so on target there. And the other thought I have is when people say, oh, who wants to hear my story? My story sounds like her story because we have the same background or the same life experiences. And I say that's not true, because when you tell your story, even if there's similar variables, nothing is exactly the same. And the other thing is you tell it with a different voice, with a different intention, with different meaning attached to it. And that touches somebody's heart in a different way than that other person might touch them. So your story absolutely matters.
That's right. Well, Lesa, your story matters, and thank you for sharing it today. And I know everybody listening to the podcast is going to be so encouraged by it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommeymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.